students from the Communication Sciences and Disorders program from the Department of CASD. And we will have, it's really just a sample of some of the research we are doing in this department. You will see it's very interdisciplinary and very different. It will be all 5 presentations, so we just wanted to give you like a sample of different kinds of research that our students are doing at the undergraduate and graduate levels. So enjoy and feel free to ask any questions. The students are eager to respond.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. Hi everyone, my name is Ava. I am a graduate student here at Brooklyn College's master's program, and today I'm going to be doing my presentation on one of the clients I had the pleasure of providing therapeutic intervention services at Brooklyn College's very own Speech and Language Hearing Center located on the 4th floor of Boiler Hall. Okay. Before I begin this presentation, how many of you all in the audience are bilinguals? Okay, a lot of us. For those of us who perhaps aren't bilingual, I really want to frame your understanding for what it's like to be a bilingual individual. The first terminology I want to introduce to you is an L1. That refers to your native or primary language of exposure. That first language you really use or were exposed to. Your L2 refers to the second language that you were exposed to. This is important to understand because there isn't a separate mechanism for individuals who are bilingual. Those languages are always in constant interaction with each other and continually influencing each other. It's also important when providing any intervention for a bilingual individual to understand whether that acquisition was simultaneous, meaning both languages were being learned at the same time, or sequential. One was learned before the other. This is also important because the biggest issue in our field, and something I want to press upon you all, is that a difference does not constitute a disorder. For a bilingual individual, there are naturally going to be some differences in their production. This should not be considered a disorder unless it is observed in both languages. An individual who is bilingual should only be elected to receive their services according to their own will and volition. So it's very important to understand that the difference is not a disorder unless otherwise proven itself. And bilingual exposure in this is very important. Now, what I present to you here is the phonemic inventory of English. A phonemic inventory refers to all the sounds present in the language. So here are all the sounds present in our English language. What you see highlighted in the red are sounds in the English language that are not present in Turkish. I gave intervention services to a child who speaks Turkish and English. I highlight this because you will naturally see some substitutions for sounds that are not present. So in English, we have something called the voiceless T, such as in think. And we have the voice TH sound, such as in this. This is important because there is a speech and literacy connection. The way you say a sound is going to be the way you produce a sound. So the idea is that if you improve the way you produce a sound, you're going to improve the way you read that sound. This also leads into another important idea called cross-linguistic transfer. So like I mentioned before, your L1 and L2 are in constant interaction with each other. So you will have those predictable patterns. So for that child that we're providing services to, TH is not present in Turkish. So what does a bilingual individual do? They make natural substitutions. A sound that's not present in their language is going to be substituted for a sound present in both languages. So that TH is not present in Turkish. Instead, what happens, they will produce a sound present in Turkish and English, for example, such as D. So something like this turns into this, because there's going to be that natural substitution. The way we read is often the way that we spell, so it's important to understand these productions when addressing literacy and articulation, or the way you say something. The child I had the pleasure of providing services to, his name is Sarah, which is a pseudonym. She's 8 years old, her L1 was Turkish, her L2 was English, and she came into the semester with concerns about her reading and the way she was producing sounds. It is very important to look at any individual from a strength-based perspective. So So she was very highly motivated, her family was extremely supportive, and this certainly played a role in the intervention I provided. Now, before I introduced my interventions, right, I initially started off giving targets that were just in English. I had binding tasks. I didn't really make sure to impress upon her parents that she's going to have these natural differences being a bilingual individual. This was very important because as a bilingual individual myself, although I do not speak Turkish, it was my job as a speech language pathologist to make sure I did my due diligence in learning that Turkish reading inventory. What are the sounds that are present in Turkish? What are the patterns? And this was so that I could provide the best culturally responsive care. So, upon doing my research, there's no rhyming in Turkish. So therefore, it was not appropriate to include rhyming as a goal. I made sure to change the targets to encompass and reflect both my Turkish and English use. Additionally, family counseling. Her parents were not under the impression that it was a difference. They believed it was a disorder. So explaining to them that she had differences helped understand and support their understanding of what was being done in the intervention. Language exposure matters. Sarah and her family were speaking Turkish. That's how they communicated. That's what she was exposed to up until she entered school. However, we provide intervention for functional impact. So I needed to understand that she had these demands that when she was in school, she's expected to communicate with peers and participate in reading English. So this was important in how I framed my intervention. As an SOP, again, I had to really impress and explain to parents that difference versus disorder. I had to explain she can receive these intervention services, but with the understanding that this is a choice and not a necessity. I had to collaborate with the family, so we utilized the evidence-based practice model that values not just the research and best literature practices, but my clinical expertise as well as Sarah and her family's perspective, because they are equally as important. So, like I said before, I made sure I adjusted my intervention. I made sure I got rid of rhyming because it wasn't appropriate. I made sure at every point that the data I was collecting was properly explained to parents. And I made sure that they were educated on the difference between difference and disorder. So we practiced those two TH sounds, starting at the sound level, then progressing to word, sentence, and finally reading. I gave her different supports to make sure she had her own awareness of her productions, and I made sure whenever possible to include materials that were relevant and supported her culture. So she loves fashion. I would provide reading passages about Turkish designs and dress to help to celebrate and really highlight that her identity and culture was important. And of course, the intervention speaks for itself. She came into the semester with about 17%, so you see that grade line that's coming down, right, for initial productions of those TH sounds. By the end of the semester, every single goal we had for her, she went up to at least 90%. Over the course of just one semester. So the key takeaways I have for you all, of course, is that a difference does not constitute a disorder. If you get nothing else, understand that, please. Okay? If you are going to work with bilingual individuals, you must understand how that exposure and use impacts their life, how it should frame your intervention, how it frames the functional impacts of what you provide, and that you must make sure whatever you're going to do is reflective of their background and language use. Thank you all. And before I leave here, I want to just acknowledge the wonderful HSS EXPO staff. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present. I want to give a special shout out to the CSD faculty staff, specifically Dr. Fusay and my clinical supervisor, Professor Corsi. Of course, to Sarah and her lovely family, and you, the wonderful audience. Thank you.
Because we started late, unfortunately, we had difficulty with uploading everything. I would recommend that keep in mind your questions and let's have all the presentations because we have a hard stop at 12:15. So I want to make sure that every student will have time to present. And then whatever time we have left, we will use for the questions and answers. pictures if that's okay. So if you have any questions about this presentation, just take notes either on paper or in your head. And so let's do the second presentation, and we will do questions at the very end of the sequence. If that's okay.
Their NASA flight interactions in their homes. And these samples were collected by video recording. The recordings were then transcribed using SALT, which is a standard tool used by SLPs to transcribe and analyze the language samples. This is where we came in. Kelly and I then independently coded the communication breakdowns using the CBCM method. After approximately 8 weeks, we independently recoded those same samples to assess the consistency of our coding over time. And we're currently in the stage of completing our second round of coding in batches. And in the final stage of our research, we'll use the Cohen's kappa statistic to calculate the inter-rater and intra-rater reliability. The inter-rater reliability compares the agreement between my coding and Kelly's coding, while the intra-rater reliability measures the consistency between our individual and final codings.
Here you can see an example of a section of coding that I completed in one of the language samples that we had. In this process, we watch the video and have the respective transcription in front of us. We first listen whenever the clinician makes a clarification request, such as, "What did you say?" or "I don't understand," based on the child's utterance and code it with the accurate code. Now this indicates that the child demonstrated a breakdown, and therefore we will have to code their utterance as well. Looking at this example, as we see on line 391, the clinician states, "Where's what?" which I coded RS, request for specification. The clarification request followed the child's utterance, "Where is it?" which I coded REF, referential ambiguity. It, as the child stated, was not previously specified, and therefore the clinician needed more information to clarify what exactly the child was referring to.
And to give a quick overview of our sample, we included 15 preschool age children, and the average age was about 4 years and 6 months old, while the standard deviation was about 10 months. The group included 9 males and 6 females, and all participants were monolingual English speakers who identified as Caucasian.
Looking at the preliminary data collected from 5 participants suggests that the CBCM has moderate inter-rater reliability based on a kappa of approximately 0.7 and a high intra-rater reliability based on a kappa greater than 0.9. The CBCM is beneficial in outlining patterns of breakdowns in individual transcripts. Now, this can allow the SLP to understand communication failures that the child exhibits and in turn curate therapy sessions in a way that will target those specific breakdown failures so that the child can improve on them.
And for our future directions, there are 2 main areas that we will focus on. First, the CBCM should be applied to a more diverse population. And our sample was limited to individuals who identify as Caucasian, and we plan to diversify our sample in terms of ethnicity moving forward. We also plan to include children from different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, as well as clinical groups, such as those on the autism spectrum and those with language disorders. This will allow us to better evaluate the method's clinical usefulness and its overall reliability across the populations. And second, our study focuses on manual coding, but for future work, we will explore AI tools that support and streamline the coding and analysis process.
Finally, we would like to extend our sincere gratitude to Dr. Epstein for her mentorship, expertise, and guidance throughout this project, as well as the TAL Mentoring and Research Program for supporting this project as well.
And we'd also like to thank the master's program students, Summer, Arinda, Kate, Daniel, Alexa, and Angelina for their assistance with this project. And finally, we'd like to thank the child participants and their caregivers as well. Thank you everyone for listening.
I don't want to close anything because we have somebody else there.
Okay.
mental health disorders has increasing prevalence. It has intensified the need for accessible access to mental health services. Traditional services often struggle to meet the needs of diverse populations. There are many barriers like social stigmas and disparities that prevent individuals to access appropriate care. AI technologies are increasing, being explored in innovative solutions to expand access, improve efficiency, and to support intervention in mental health care. Our research question is, how do AI-powered mental health systems compare to human professions in providing individualized mental health screenings and support for adults? Human versus AI support. We have our pros and our cons between the two of AI technology and human professions. Our pros for AI technologies are a structured response, limited emotional depth. Our human professions pros is professional training and skill development, empathetic and flexible context awareness. Our cons for AI technology is data privacy, absences of empathy and lack of effectiveness, and cons is financial costs, time, and management and stigma. Our methods was a survey-based research design, which was 25 questions. We had multiple choice questions and open-ended questions. One of the examples are, how comfortable would you feel discussing mental health concerns with an AI chatbots? Our participants was 31. We had 29 females and 2 males, the ages between 18 to 45-year-old students, educators, and mental health professionals. We had a good amount of mental health professionals. We had counselors and therapists to participate.
So, because our study was aimed to compare AI technology to human professionals in providing personalized and support, we asked participants whether they have ever interacted with an AI chatbot for mental health consultations, in which 20 said no and 20 responded with yes. So, although our participants didn't really seem to have an interaction with the AI services, they did seem to acknowledge that they did have a lot of benefits, in which the top 3 chosen were its 24/7 availability, its convenience, being able to access it from home, over the phone, through apps, and then its faster responses. And then this graph just shows the level of trust in each of the source. And even though the participants didn't interact with the AI for these consultations, and even though they did interact, they didn't know they acknowledged its benefits, and the interactions being shown in like it's integrated into services now, they still trust human professionals. And then the findings of the study just describes the difference between participants trusting AI chatbots and human professionals and each of its benefits. And overall, as technology continues to evolve and be integrated into our everyday lives, AI chatbots can emerge as an additional source tool to be used to, let's say, support, enhance, and provide appropriate mental health care services to adults. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to President Martin for oversight.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nathania Brown, and I'm a senior at Brooklyn College. I'll be graduating this year. My major is communication science disorders, and I had the opportunity to work with Professor Fredrickson, my advisor last semester. Our research research topic is Follow the Leader If You Can. Does early American Sign Language production correlate with memory for movement? So, what is sign language? This is a form of communication that uses the visual manual modality. It is very diverse. There are variations in regional dialects that's developed through local deaf communities, schools, and cultural influences. And one of these examples is American Sign Language. American Sign Language is an independent language with its own grammar and structure. What makes it complex is how all of the features work together at the same time. For example, facial expressions are not just emotional, they're grammatical. Every sign is made up of hand shape, movement, location, palm orientation, and non-manual markers, you can see right there, such as facial expression and head movements. Now, given the complexity of learning a new language, we were interested in learning whether or not the ability to remember and produce complex languages give hearing learners an advantage when trying to learn ESL. Therefore, we asked the question, is there a correlation between memory for movement and the number of American Sign Language produced? And the best way to answer this was by administering two tasks. The movement span task, which measures memory for movement, and the verbal fluency task. This measures ESL sign production. Why is this important? This is very important because there is a lack of research on people with hearing who learn sign language. If you think about it, these individuals are switching from one modality to another. Unlike deaf signers, these learners are transitioning from the auditory-based language modality to a visual manual modality, and this is a shift that may influence their cognition. So for my methods, we use a sample of 8 college adult students with no prior experience to American Sign Language. The participants were recorded with their informed consent while completing both tasks. So to measure the participant memory for movement, we used the movement span task that was developed by Conclusion, and they were tasked to reproduce meaningless movement sequences of varying length. We can see right there on the right that image. But let me just show you a quick demonstration. So participants were tasked to reproduce something like this: arms up and out. This arm goes right here and pull up. Another example would be this or this. Then we score based on accuracy. So if they got it right, they will get a point. If it's partially correct, it will be half point, and then if it's incorrect or missing, they will get 0. For the second task, the ESL verbal fluency, we administered the ESL verbal fluency task. Participants were asked to name as many signs as possible within 2 minutes. Specifically, these were colors, name of professions, fruits, and items of furniture, and then we counted the number of unique signs they produced. So we used a software called ELAN, which is specifically used to annotate video and audio recordings. Then we isolate each frame, right there, there's an example on the left. And then we cross-reference how each frame should look with the target movement. And these were our results. So, based on the graph, you y-axis shows the score, and the x-axis represents the number of participants. The blue bar represents the total movement scores, and the orange bar represents the ASL verbal fluency score. We can see that there is a weak correlation between the ASL verbal fluency and the movement score. This means that participants with higher memory movement scores do not consistently have high ASL verbal fluency scores. So, in conclusion, as stated before, there was not really a significant correlation, and this may relate to our sample because we only had about 8 participants with varying levels of ASL learning experience, ranging from 3 to 8 weeks, and this could affect fluency. So further research is needed to determine if a correlation exists. I want to extend my gratitude to the TAL Foundation and the Mellon Transfer Student Research Program. I also want to thank PSC CUNY for their generous support which made this research possible. I want to thank the HSS staff for making this expo possible as well. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to my advisor and my fellow researchers who worked on this project with me. Thank you so much. These are my references.
Hello everyone, my name is and I'm really excited to share the project that I've been working on with Professor Fusette this semester on culturally responsive counseling practice in speech language pathology. And referring a little bit to Aya's presentation, as we can see with her interaction with Sarah, this is something that is really important in our field of the counseling. So to start, I would like to briefly introduce what speech language pathologists actually do. Since our scope of practice is much bigger than a lot of people realize. So speech language pathologists, or SLPs, as you will hear me say a lot, they work with the individuals across lifespan on communication and swallowing. And according to American Speech Language and Hearing Association, we work across 8 domains listed here. And one domain that I would like to highlight today is counseling. So at first you might think, what does the counseling have to do with speech and swallowing? But when you look at the, sorry, but when you think about, about the reality of communication disorders, it makes complete sense. So SLPs, we not only explain the diagnosis to our clients, but at the same time, we deliver very difficult news and assist them and their families help them adapt basically the new reality. And so beyond just treating disorder and speech or swallowing, we also support them mentally, emotionally, socially, and their families as well. So this is actually important in a place like New York where we live, where as you can see over 150 languages are being spoken in New York schools. And speech language pathologists, I assist individuals with wide cultural and linguistic backgrounds. And this is not only about the languages, about different languages, but also about the race, sex, gender, and so on. better counseling skills. And however, as we've noticed, many SLP programs still provide very limited training on counseling and education, and this creates a gap between the preparation and expectation. So based on this gap, I focused my research on 3 main questions. First, how effectively do graduate SLPs programs prepare students with counseling skills? Second, do SLPs feel confident and competent in providing counseling services? And the third one is, how does structured counseling training, and by that I mean designated coursework, simulations, or guided practice, impact SLPs, like their skills, their confidence, and clinical effectiveness. So to answer those questions, I conducted a review of an existing research. I researched multiple academic databases listed here. I used the keywords counseling, speech language pathology, and training. And I initially was able to identify 63 articles, and 11 of them, after reviewing, were actually focusing on counseling training. And after the full screening, 8 of them were accessible to me, and they're included in those analysis. So from those articles, the 3 main findings emerged. The literature shows that most graduate programs do not fully prepare students with strong counseling skills. Also, at the same time, many SLPs report feeling underprepared and they have low confidence when providing counseling skills to their clients. However, when structured counseling training is provided, the SLPs show clear improvement in their skills, confidence, and communication with clients and families improves as well. So these findings actually directly answer all my questions, but I would like to briefly break them down for you. So starting with the training gap, the research shows that many graduate programs do not provide enough counseling instructions. For example, only 47% of students completed a dedicated counseling courses, and many programs do not offer them at all, or they only briefly mention them in other classes, which is basically not taught in depth. Also, in addition to that, there is no clear standards on how counseling should be taught in the programs, and that leads to the inconsistency across all the programs. And as a result of this gap, we see an impact on clinicians themselves. So many SLPs report feeling underprepared and they lack confidence when assisting clients. Also, about 75% report little to no hands-on training, and this makes it very difficult to apply those skills in a clinical settings. And overall, this gap affects clinicians' confidence and their effectiveness, which is very important because counseling and interpersonal skills are essential for effective client care. However, as I mentioned earlier, the research also shows very positive findings, and what we've learned is that when structured counseling training is provided, outcomes improve significantly. So students who completed dedicated coursework, they show higher confidence across all domains. We've learned that stimulation-based and hands-on training also improves clients-clinician relationship, and even brief training about an hour long improves listening and empathy, which improves clinician-client relationship. And based on those findings, several key recommendations can be made. So the first one is that there is a need for standardized counseling curriculum guidelines. Second one is graduate programs should include dedicated counseling courses, and increasing hands-on and stimulation-based training is also very important. As far as the future direction goes, we believe that there's more research that needs to be done in terms of counseling across different communication disorders, and this is actually that we're already working on with Professor. And I would like to thank everybody in the audience for your time and attention. I would like to thank my mentor, Professor Fuse, for all the guidance, EXPO organizers. Thank you.
So, now we have about 10 minutes max for questions, but I'm sure you have many questions. Feel free to ask about any of the presentations out of the 5.
Do we have the students come up, the presenters?
If you know what the question is, right? If they know.
They don't come up to talk.
I mean, they can, but there's no saying. You can just maybe chat. I think you can just get out. Because we only have 10 minutes.
There's a hand back here.
Hi, I had a question for Adam's presentation. What was the hardest sound for your client to achieve?
So definitely, like I said, that TH sound because she didn't have it in Turkish, and that was her L1, right? So she's growing up here in Turkish, that's what her family speaks. And now I'm asking her, to work on her sound, number one, that she's not really exposed to outside of her home, and that she knows she has a difficulty with. It was really important for me to frame the intervention. Listen, I know this sound is difficult, but this is also why it's difficult for you. This is not something, that's only because it's a difficult sound. It's difficult for you particularly because it's not a sound you grew up hearing. Your mom doesn't usually use that sound. Your sister, your brother, right? So I think that sound in particular because that L1 exposure background history and the fact that she knew that it was difficult. But taking the time to explain to her why and encouraging her really helped her solve the intervention results, even though it was difficult.
Were there any vowel sounds?
No, so really the intervention, which is why I really wanted to press the difference versus disorder, was strictly those sounds that weren't present in Turkish. So that's why I didn't want to impress upon her parents that it was a disorder, because she was only having those difficulties in sounds that she didn't have that, background in. So it was truly just those cross-linguistic differences as opposed to disorder. Thank you.
I just want to first comment that all the presentations were excellent. Most of the students are either my current or former students. I just want to tell you how proud I am of your beautiful presentation. I have a question for Judith. I wanted to ask your opinion. I agree with you anecdotally, sorry about that, that counseling is not adequately addressed in graduate programs. Just based on my own experience on our program and familiarity with other graduate programs, who do you think is the best place to teach that kind of competency? Do you think it's in a standalone course, or do you think it should be rather embedded in the students' clinical experiences?
I think that a good idea would be to instead of doing an elective course, one of the elective courses replace it with the counseling. Because it really depends on the person's personality. Like not everybody, some people really book smart and really focus on the treatment itself, not really understanding the emotional part about what's really happening, what emotionally happens with the people when they happen.
And I think it's hard for it to be hypothetical in the standalone course. I think we still need a standalone required, right? So we're saying a required course, but I feel like it needs to be embedded in the students' clinical experiences and practicum so that it's related to specific times and it's not just hypothetical. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks for sharing.
Any other questions? I have a question for Patty and Kelly. You were showing us the different types of levels of inter and intra-rater disagreements and agreements. And I was wondering if you had any sense of what types of, between the two cohorts, what types of disagreements you mostly encountered?
That would probably stem from the CBCM code that we would assign to the child's communication breakdown. So, I may think something is preferential, but maybe it's like lexical issue. So that's where there might be some discrepancies.
And maybe a very quick follow-up. If you had something like a referential ambiguity, would you also consider gesture or input from the child if they were pointing and saying, oh, where is it? Would that be counted in how we were thinking about this in order to restrict the language?
Yeah, so that's why we have the video, not just the transcript, so to see both nonverbal and verbal cues. So the child can be pointing to something, and if we didn't have the video, we wouldn't see that the child is pointing to something. Therefore, there is no breakdown. So if the child isn't pointing to something and saying, oh, this, and just not, and the clinician doesn't understand what this is, then that would be considered a breakdown.
on the safety of AI compared to human professional when the mental health challenges?
I mean, while doing this research, we also did research about its effectiveness. And
Can you cut out? Because we can't hear anyone.
And
Sorry.
if it's safe. And there are research out there, there are articles where, you know, it has led to some like, you know, what's the word, like very sad times for families. But I guess it's more about how it's integrated into these services and like how companies can use it to obviously like in my opinion, different from settings in which like can we use AI to rely on it as instead of being a professional.
So for the safety, we actually did a research question on how safety do you think it is, and a lot of our participants said that they would still use it, but if it was a stricter database and a stricter safety component on it, they would use it fully. I actually did a study on it myself with actually using AI for my mental health issues, and it actually is a supportive tool. So one of our things that we put on our slide is AI is not supposed to replace human professionals, but just to work alongside them. So for example, if you go to the doctor's office and they screen you for anxiety tests, they're actually using an AI embedded tool to screen you for if you have any type of mental disorders.
Okay, we have
Someone wanna ask
maybe
Simon?
one more question.
Simon's presentation. Just, I mean, go ahead, you have something that.
And did you recognize those patterns in her siblings or family members?
So I did, as part of like my education and like conversations with her mom and her father, they did note that they did recognize those productions in themselves as parents as well as her siblings, and then that also required me to do even more counseling and expand upon the difference versus disorder even more, because then they were saying, oh, she's learning the mistakes from me, and I had to really explain, not mistakes, they're of course differences. So certain, members in like clinical patients, right? Members, family members, if they're all under the wrong impression, it becomes more shame about something being difficult or seeking intervention, understanding why you produce things spiritually.
Okay, our last question.
Just a quick comment, because I found the science presentation so interesting. I think an interesting related question would be looking at how ASL users perhaps have stronger memory skills because they rely on use of manual language, right? With having distinct, and I know it's very different than your research question, but we know that individuals compensate by using one skill or another. Not that at the outset they had stronger skills, and that's a mean, but by necessity. Right? So that would be interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I think time is over. Sorry for the delay.